Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
you can have it.
Can't hear us. Heidi, can you hear us?
Over there. All the, everything you need is on the left.
I can hear you.
We asked, where are you?
Oh, I'm in Costa Rica.
Oh,
Wow.
do you want to switch the camera around to the beach view? Oh, yeah, I knew it was there.
Sorry, I heard it's pretty cold there.
10 degrees probably. What is it now?
I don't know. That's a 72 on the wall,
Blowing
but
snow.
it's also January 19th, so.
Yeah.
Recording in
Okay.
progress.
Welcome, everyone. I'll call the meeting to order. Welcome to the select board meeting for Monday, January 19th. Balmy 72 degrees. It's an inside joke. It's what it says on the wall. We have an interesting agenda here this evening, but we have the right group in place to deal with it. So I'll call the meeting to order and we'll start by rising and facing the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
And to the republic
for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Now we'll move on to the point in the meeting where I'll open it up for public comments. If anyone has anything to talk about that's not on the agenda, now would be the time to do so. Anything that's not on the agenda? Not seeing a lot of hands going up in the room or on Zoom, so we'll move on to approval of the minutes from February 4th.
Make a motion to approve the minutes of February 4th.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That's unanimous. No Katie tonight.
Oh, we should have had Heidi make the motion from Costa Rica and have it reflected in the minutes.
She voted from.
That's true. She voted from Costa Rica.
Okay, we have visitors from the south and north here with us this evening. With discuss the possible uses for the former county courthouse, which the town owns, but the village government occupies. Who's going to lead this discussion?
I'll start.
Okay, Tom, if you want to.
You get up and stand.
Yeah, there's a microphone for the Zoom meeting up there.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Thank you all for taking the time. Really appreciate it. I want to make one correction on the agenda. It says we're here as village trustees. We're really here as volunteers. It has nothing to do with village government at all, really. This is a strict passion play about the courthouse building. Really, we're going to introduce her. I'm Tom, this is Martha Heidelman, Sarah McClintock. We think we have kind of an interesting idea, a preservation idea for the courthouse. We also want to thank quickly Gordon Black. Gordon's very helpful in listening to our kind of harebrained scheme in the beginning, but at any rate, really, I think all of you know the courthouse, right? I mean, it's literally a historic centerpiece of our town and has been for a long, long time. And really, we're just here to talk about possible pathways to preserving it. And I love the courthouse building. I live probably 4 or 5 houses down. I spent a lot of time in the courthouse. I think many of you might remember the 802 bell ringing thing. John O'Keefe had this great idea to go ring the bell at 802 during COVID. And he called me up and said, hey, would you be one of the key holders? And I said, yeah, absolutely. I'd be happy to. I'm bored out of my mind looking at 4 walls. So my family and myself really every day for 4.5, almost 5 months went down and rang the bell. And it became kind of this thing where we posted on Facebook and neighbors came out and it kind of turned into this thing. And that's where I really began to love the courthouse. It's literally, it just oozes history, and it begs, to be preserved. So at any rate, I want to kind of paint a picture of what our idea is. And I want you to kind of go ahead into the future, maybe 5 years. And 5 years from now, see a building that's fully restored, that is a maybe cultural and educational centerpiece, of not just Manchester, but for all the North Shires. A place that is financially viable, sustainable, has its own board, and is really a cultural center and historically preserved building for us to go on. Again, I'll paint another picture. Imagine going there and seeing a presentation by Green Mountain Lifelong Learning. Imagine taking a cooking class. Imagine seeing a Warren Miller ski movie in fall. Imagine a concert from Taconic Music. Imagine a concert from Greg Cutler and Buddy Hollow. A place where the community can kind of come together, and it's really a place of cultural enrichment where programs could be put on. And more importantly, it's sustainably, financially sustainable and viable. I know that sounds, all high in the sky, or it sounds kind of, where do you go from here to there? And that's really what we're here to kind of propose the idea. I know I paint a very rosy picture about what are the mechanics? How does that actually work? How do we go from that, center that's fully restored and preserved mechanically? How do we get there from here? And that's really what we're going to kind of propose. I want smarter people than myself to talk about the mechanics of that. And I'll let Martha talk next about kind of Martha's expertise is in the nonprofit. And we're really lucky to have her kind of pick our brains in this. And I should say that, all those organizations that I talked about, one I didn't talk about was the Manchester Historical Society. That could be a place where they have a home, but it's those places have expressed, having talked about the idea to them, they really have shown an interest, say, hey, that would be a great idea. Obviously, they can't commit to anything. For the simple fact, there's no structure in place to do that, but those could be what we would call stakeholders, people that have, viable stake in the success of the building continuing. We talked to the GM at Equinox Hotel, and he was very excited about the possibility of it. Even they need extra event space. That would be some overflow for them. They also like to have some facilities that were off-site. So there was potential there. They were very excited about it. And most everyone all those organizations that I talked about were excited about the idea. So that's the stakeholder idea of making it viable financially. I might say with very limited stress on the taxpayer. That's really the, if any, to be honest with you. But mechanically, I'll let Martha kind of go into how it would kind of work structurally, and we're happy to answer any questions that you might have afterwards.
Thank you, Tom. I'm Martha Heileman. I've been a fundraiser involved with nonprofits about 35 years. So that's the world I'm come from. That's my experience. We have one of the oldest houses in Vermont, in Manchester Village, happens to be. And so my interest has been in old homes and part of the Historical Society and the work that they've done. So it's been wonderful to have that experience. But we drive past the courthouse all the time, and the idea of it falling apart hurt me. I really didn't want to see that happen. So I've been talking a little bit, to Sarah, and trying to see if there's something we could do. So just a small group of us, about 5, said, let's see what we can do. So from my perspective, it's a very possible, doable, sustainable project. We have spoken to the Vermont Community Foundation. Elizabeth Marks was the one that said, this sounds like a very viable thing. Why don't you talk to the Preservation Trust of Vermont? So we have Ben Doyle, the executive director, has come down, actually. He's very familiar with the courthouse. He loves it. He thinks it's a great project, and has encouraged us to continue searching and defining what we want. So they also are good at giving small grants to, not even organizations, just groups of people. So just like us, and they've done it around the state. They have done like 288 projects or something like that. So that was very encouraging to speak to them and say, it's not just a small idea that we have. It seems more viable. Um, The other thing that we could do, we'd like to look into being a 501c3. We have an attorney and an accountant that are willing to help us. They've done this before, so it doesn't seem impossible. So making it a 501c3 makes it a much easier possibility to do fundraising and also to get grants so that it would be viable that way. It would be critical, actually. So I think, there are two parts. There's expense for being the preservation, which we really want to do. And then the second part is for sustainability and for being a viable, ongoing organization. So I can answer more questions if you want, but in the meantime, Sarah, would you like to speak on more of the practical points of view?
Thank you, Martha. Yeah, I'm Sarah McClintock, and as Martha said, this came about because of just a group of friends talking. My interest is from the Historical Society point of view. I'm on the board there. And, we have at the Historical Society always talked about ways that we can engage the town in the collection, and we get so many questions as visitors are coming through, especially with the 250th celebration of the signing of the Declaration of Independence and all of that, asking how they can learn more about Manchester history. And the courthouse is a perfect location for them to come and to see the story of this whole area, really. It would be a marvelous resource for a much broader universe than just the village, but the town, and for we think, the whole region. And as Tom said, we hope to draw people in through concerts and small gatherings and movies and a regular community center eventually. In doing that, Martha and I, for instance, went down to North Bennington and took a look at what they've done to create out of an historical structure a sustainable rent-generating structure that was once I guess, what was it, the town hall? It was the bank. And, now it serves, the main central area and the whole lobby area of the bank is now where they have gallery presentations and community events. And the office spaces within that building are rented out in such a way that the utilities and the ongoing maintenance of the building can be sustained. So there are examples, even locally, where this is being done, and many more can be drawn from as this progresses. So we feel very much with, the village offices perhaps staying in the building and then bringing in 2 or 3 more service-oriented businesses, like maybe a lawyer or a psychiatrist, that sort of thing, that won't destroy the structure. We can actually hope to maintain or sustain the building without costing much to the town or to the 501c3. And so overall, between the fundraising at the initial stages to do the capital improvements and then the ongoing sustainability through the rent structure, we're hoping it could work. And so what is our ask of you? At this stage, we need to probably engage with an engineer and do some of the basic data gathering to determine how much that capital improvement will cost. And then we can start working out numbers. And we'd love to be able to work with the town in talking about perhaps a 99-year lease or some form of structure so that we can discuss with our potential donors and, the sources of grants, the very nature of how we would work with the town to develop the property. Are there any questions that you have at this point?
Yeah, Martha, you talked a little bit about the and so did you, Sarah, that possibility of there being a 501c3 that actually is the proprietor of this venture. And how does the town, as the owner, you mentioned a 99-year lease, how does the town fit into that picture? Would the 501c3 be solely responsible for maintenance and all the expenses that go along with the building? If so, what is the benefit beyond the fact that we're looking at a community center to my bosses, the taxpayers, of which two of you are, of Manchester? Is the town going to just relinquish this for no fee or $1 for a 99-year lease? Is that what the expectation is?
Yeah, well, I think those are details that we're willing to talk about. I mean, I think that's a next step kind of questions, and how we structure that in a way that's beneficial to the town and its citizens and to this preservation idea. Obviously, we're gonna have to weigh the aspects of preservation versus, does the town want to make some money on the actual building or the leasing of it? I don't know. Those are questions that, we're willing to talk about, and certainly we're sensitive to. So we don't really have a hard set fast plan about that, but we're willing to talk about it.
And Martha, you had mentioned that it was probably more advantageous to have it operated by a 501c3 with regard to grants. Are more grants available to a 501c3 than a municipality?
That is a debatable question because I asked the Preservation Trust people. And basically, there are more advantages for a 501c3 than not just the grants, but from the availability. There's more choices, more possibilities out there. The town could own it, but if indeed, according to the IRS, you would have to hold that money separate. It would have to be a separate account and then be doled out accordingly. It would not be in the general fund. That's the one, I think, negative thing for the town. And to answer the 501c3 question, yes, we would take the responsibility on for the maintenance. That's what our job would be.
And who would create the 501c3? How would that be formed?
We can do that with an attorney and an accountant. And it's basically you apply to the IRS. There's a 5-page form. And it does take, maybe 6 months to get that. It's not a quick thing, but it's not 2 years like it used to be. And they've had experience in doing this. Is that
Will you be sponsored by the Historical Society while that decision is pending?
The Preservation Trust of Vermont would do that. They call it fiscal sponsorship, and they would be happy to do that.
So they would physically take the funds.
Yes.
And in the interim of us getting the 501c3.
So just trying to get a better handle on how this would all work. In the creation of a 501c3, certainly we need an accountant and a lawyer, and the town is the landowner at this point. Would there need to be a board prior to
Yes, it
selling?
would. And that's the one thing we'd also like to ask the town to identify someone from, your administration to sit on the board, because, you're clearly a main stakeholder here.
I think it'll be more than just us having representation on the board. I think this being the legislative body, we should be involved in the creation of the whole board.
100%.
And certainly you three have worked hard independently of the town, the landowner, but I don't see that being adversarial. We've met, just so that everybody knows, Scott and I met with Tom and Martha and Sarah, and we talked about this, and I'm not being blindsided by it. And I've formulated a few questions in my mind since we did meet. And I think it's a really exciting and interesting idea. And I just want to make sure that we do it in a way like each of you has said, that it's sustainable and the opportunity is there to preserve and maintain this wonderful structure. If it's a 99-year lease, I suspect, given the history of all this, I'll still be on the board in 99 years. But,
The structure of the lease could be any way that the new governing, whatever the people are and the board, right? You'd say, hey, however you want to structure it. If this doesn't become, at some point becomes non-viable financially, ownership would revert back to the town. So there would be a catch-all built in there.
I guess from my perspective, at this juncture and at this point, you've done a lot of legwork and you've come forth with what I think is a really cool idea and some possibilities in which direction it should go. And of course, Gordon Black's been involved.
Great.
Yeah, he's usually in direct communication with us on what's going on. But I think from this point forward, we should be involved.
Sure.
As the landowner, and so that we can kind of know what's going on and help steer it in the direction that makes sense.
Yeah, well, I think one of the main things we're asking is for the town to let us help create a pathway to it. This is we're going to hand over a lot of what we've done here to you all. We would like to be a part of it, but how we create the structure going forward is entirely up to you all and to us. But we really want just help you guys create a path to this if you think this is a good idea for building.
I love your enthusiasm. I think it's going to be contagious, and so I look forward to all of you being involved in this project going forward. And
I have a quick question.
yeah, go ahead.
If the town of Manchester continues to be the landowner, and so the municipality owns it, and there is a 501c3 still on top of it operating the lease, things like the MERP grant, which are only qualified for municipalities, if we still own that building, can we not still go out and potentially utilize a MERP grant or something similar to that for some of those renovations? Just a thought.
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have the final structure.
No, we don't, but I'm just thinking out loud that, there are obviously benefits to 501c3. But, if we have like the energy efficiency grant that we have for this building, I'm sure there's going to be a ton of energy efficiency things that could be beneficial to that building as well. And if it maintains some ounce of municipality ownership, that it might have the ability to still.
I'm thinking, as we get into it, they'll research this and find the best path for this. And I mean, there's ADA requirements that
of course,
they're looking for, but also that building is eligible for that type of funding. So,
right.
So we'll find the best path and go that route as they.
For people that are hearing this for the first time and may not know, the courthouse was owned by the county. And Bennington County was the only county in the state that had two shires, two courthouses, the North Shire and the South Shire. We use that term North Shire a lot, but it really refers to the fact that we had a courthouse here in Manchester. It was never Manchester's courthouse. Under a provision in the documents under which the county owned that building, if it ever stopped being used as a courthouse, ownership would revert to the town of Manchester, even though it's in the village, and the village always had offices there. So we were the, I won't say surprise recipient of this gift, but because we knew what was coming. But it's not something that we've owned for hundreds of years. It's been 3 years, 4 years. Well, no, it's before COVID. Been longer than I think, 5 years. But we've never been, and Heidi, of course, sat on a committee that was looking at the courthouse and potential opportunities for what could happen there. But we've never formulated a real plan. And I think that this idea checks a lot of the boxes as far as what it might be used for. And I'm open to all kinds of suggestions as to how we might achieve that goal, but I certainly appreciate all the time put on it. Heidi, do you have any thoughts on it?
I've been listening and I agree that there's a lot of potential with the building, and I think just getting some more clarity around, what makes the most sense structure wise before, proceeding, hoping for the best. I think we should try to really figure out what the best opportunities are for grants and what the best ownership structure is. But yeah, no, other than that, it's, I'm supportive of definitely continuing to do some work on it.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to ask, there must be some precedent out there for this kind of thing. And you mentioned Bennington, and I don't know how they set it up, but they may have gone through a lot of the hurdles that we're talking about.
Absolutely. And that's what the Preservation Trust of Vermont does. It's got, out of the 288, over 100 were started by just small groups of people. It's not a previous existing organization. And, whether it's a store, a country store, or, a library, whatever, there's just tons of them. And I have actually some copies of their annual report. You can see examples of them if you wanted to see that.
I have been sitting on my kitchen table.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that as far as next steps would be, if the board thinks that this is viable, or we meet again, at some point, inviting them back and hearing what they had to say to us. This is what they do. I mean, they really understand preservation and how to structure it, the options that you could go about. So I think having their insight, talking to you all about it, or whatever kind of committee is formed after this, was tremendously helpful and very informative.
How important is it to the state that this landmark be preserved?
State doesn't care.
They don't care.
I mean,
So this really, nobody, I would think it would be a fairly important building in
It's a good question.
Vermont.
No, really, and I always think about this. Think about 50 years from now. If the courthouse is restored, or it isn't. I mean, if it's restored and it's a vital part, a centerpiece of the community, like it always has been, those people 50 years from now are going to say, boy, I'm glad in 2020s they did something about it. So, I think it's one of those things that if there's a better idea for it, obviously we're open to that, but this is one pathway we see that is viable, and sustainable.
And apply for the grants that the state might have, or even at the federal level, requires a structure and,
right.
A clarity on what path we will take to use the money wisely. So that's really why we want to create that, so we can pursue those grants.
Yeah, how it's structured could be any number of ways, but that's exactly what it is. How it's structured will give us access to funds to help preservation. That's really the best way you
I
want.
think your body and our body and the town should also decide, and I think they would, and I can't speak for them, obviously, but that this is a very important preservation project for Manchester. I think the Opera House was somewhat important. This, I think, is very important.
There is so much history, as Tom said. I mean, that's where the Civil War, soldiers mustered, it's hugely important to this area.
Right.
Well, I had been in the building several times for Act 250 hearings, when the Environmental Commission would come down and sit there. And but when Scott and I met with these three individuals, it was at the courthouse, and I got a chance to walk through it all again, and it's a really cool, interesting space. And that courtroom itself would lend itself to public hearings, town type meetings,
Yeah.
as well as other
Could be a lot of-
community
yeah, it'd be
oriented.
Great place to have special meetings.
It really would be.
Yeah.
It's,
And I think Norman Rockwell did a painting from within that space, or it was the background. Anyway, Heidi's got her hand up.
Just got her hand up. Ivan.
Heidi.
Hi, yeah, the only other thing that struck me just listening to this conversation is that some of the things that were discussed kind of in terms of use seem very similar to what we have at the library. And so even just having the Historical Society have office space there, they're at the library now. So I would just like to see a direction that doesn't kind of compete or do exactly kind of some of the things that we asked the library to do and just think of it maybe in a different way.
Two of us, thank you, Heidi. Thank you very much. Two of us have been trustees on the library. And in fact, we were in the formation of the new building. And it's really, I know exactly what you're saying because we were talking about the same conversation, whatever it was, 15 years, no, how many years ago, as a hub, you know. And I think we don't want to step on the toes of the library at all. You know, I have a lot of respect and want the library to be very successful, which it is. But I also think that we have an opportunity to have smaller entities coming in and also have a little bit of overflow because I think the library is getting more requests than they can actually handle. So, but I think that having the library as part of the conversation is really critical. Thank you.
And I think on the Historical Society point, they're not thinking of moving their offices. What they're thinking of doing is putting some of the funds they have raised to work to help restore this building. So they're, if you will, a strong aggregator of donation funds in this community. And they see this as an opportunity to put that to a good use with a very similar mission to their own.
Thank you.
Weddings. We need to, yeah, we haven't talked about weddings. Big revenue generator.
That's what.
You're a justice of the peace, right,
Yeah.
Martha? We're talking about Martha giving weddings.
The Equinox did actually express the need for overflow space, believe it or not, like, which I was kind of astounded by, but you know, the GM was very supportive of the idea and said that extra space once in a while is very, very much needed for them.
And Martha, I think I mentioned to you too, on a side note, is that, you know, there's other nonprofits here in the community that are also looking for space for other types of spaces, period.
That's right.
A teen center, or like the collaborative, a place for, you know, you know, whether it's, you know, just outside of the school setting, outside of the library setting. I think, and yes, you're right, with the library, I think scheduling things out at the library, thank God, is actually really difficult because there's so much programming happening there. So another physical space is, I think, very important.
I'd like to just pitch personally, I think that we are so fortunate to have this town with the library and all the nonprofits that are supporting us and giving us a quality of life. I think that, you know, we really relish. So thank you for
No,
that leadership.
it's interesting, you know, in the context of the library, which used to be at the Mark Skinner building. That could have played out much differently if somebody like the Vermont Preservation Trust got involved in that building. I mean, what's done is done, but and that building is secure, I think, and being utilized. So good things do happen in this town. But this is a publicly owned building that I think, because of the history of it, should remain a publicly focused building. And what is the next step?
Great question. Well, really, we would like to basically get the input or meet with whomever the town wants to kind of have us work in partnership with, or however you want to structure it. But if we're asking for a next step, we would really like to meet. We've been meeting monthly. We might ramp that up, but we really want to continue to move this progress forward in any way the town sees fit. If that's a point, somebody from the town to meet with us and they can report back monthly, or we're happy to come monthly or
I
whatever.
think that the board, represented by up to 2 members, so it's not a public, you know, an open meeting.
Yeah.
should be involved at this point. And, we'll decide how that's gonna work and we'll make sure that we can collaborate and discuss. And
We're all for that.
anything else?
Just get out a few of these.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tom.
Coming.
Pass them around.
Watch your step.
The cord, Martha.
Watch your step. There's a.
I know, I don't want to step over it. Thank you.
Yeah, okay.
You'll have to get yours later, sorry.
Thank you.
I'm reading right now.
Yeah. This should be called precedent.
All right, agenda item number 6 is, we are in receipt of, proposed revisions to the Manchester Land Use and Development Ordinance.
Are we doing, wait, 5? I think we're on, oh, wait, hold on. Did we go
That's it.
past that?
Just finished 5, we're on to 6.
I'm on it. I'm sorry, wrong page. Sorry. Totally different agenda. Moving along.
The minutes reflect that Greg has his own agenda.
No. This is the previous meeting agenda.
Okay.
I was looking at the wrong tab.
Okay, last week, the planning commission, forwarded this to us. It's a very simple revision to the, payment in lieu of parking or part of the ordinance, where it, changes where the payment in lieu of parking can occur from the town core to the, downtown zoning district. Is that the only change?
That's it, yeah. They wrote a little summary that I got after the packets went out. If you want me to read, it's just a short paragraph.
Okay, yeah, sure, thank you.
This is the town of Manchester is proposing to change the Manchester Land Use and Development Ordinance to condense the area in which payment in lieu of parking is available in the town of Manchester. Payment in lieu of parking is a section of the ordinance which allows commercial business owners to pay the town of Manchester an amount determined by the select board per parking space if they lack sufficient parking, with the goal that the money will go towards a municipal parking lot to be built in the future. Payment in lieu of parking is currently allowable in the mixed use 1, town center, and downtown zoning districts. The proposal is to decrease the allowable area for payment in lieu of parking to only the downtown zoning district. So you have the,
Do you,
so
I apologize for not participating more at the planning commission level on this. I know at these meetings I've discussed the rationale and the way that this should be applied. And I just wonder if there should be some language in there that this is an attempt by the town to address older existing structures built prior to the automobile that have no space for parking attached to that building. And whether that makes any difference, but I think it's important that this board, and being the one that determines, do we determine just what's going to be paid per parking space?
you do.
Or do we control how many spaces are actually being considered? Or does that happen at the DRB
I
level?
think that happens at the DRB level.
That was my recollection as to how it worked. So without giving the DRB some guidance as to how to apply this through the ordinance itself, we might wind up back in a situation where we're looking at a brand new commercial development that's being built with a parking deficit, and that was never the intention. If you're going to level everything that's there, start from scratch, you should apply, you should conform with the ordinance as it's written. If you're trying to use an existing structure, which has historic value, and the lot is all that building sits on, there's no lot beyond that, like the buildings in the center of town. Obviously, they can't provide parking, therefore they couldn't get a permit without this ordinance. To me, it's a bit of a reach to say, well, if I buy this property and knock down the little buildings that are there and maximize the size of the building that's on it with an idea that I'm creating deficit parking, all I gotta do is pay for parking and the town will put it somewhere else and I can generate a lot more revenue on this. That wasn't the reason for the ordinance to begin with. And I'm not on the planning commission, but it seems to me that there should be some guidance in the ordinance for the development review board as to when this should apply. A little late in the game. Thoughts?
Nothing in the proposed language speaks to that. So it doesn't require that it's based on pre-existing versus new,
And maybe the planning commission feels
completely new.
differently about it than I do.
I don't think that was discussed.
Yeah.
I mean, personally, I mean, I am not necessarily in favor of making it more restricted because I think there are still properties that are, like, for instance, some of those on Depot Street. I'm thinking of the old Hughes Market. Yes, it's my old family. Like there, if the use of that building were to change, and they didn't knock it down and they wanted to do something there, it's limited in its scope. Bagel Works, if it didn't have the available parking that's like deeded to them, I believe, on the side of the old Video One building, they wouldn't be able to operate under this either. Thinking about the buildings across from RK Miles that may not have, like, I mean, Pets et cetera is probably a bad example, but some of, Tilting at Windmills or any of those other buildings that are outside the downtown district that would not qualify, that are not going to be, that may have a viable other business type that could go in there, but would not have the ability to use payment in lieu of parking because of that same structure. That we're now limiting to just, the downtown section, which ends at Polo, right? And then goes up Main Street. Does not include the back end of like North Shire Bookstore, but it includes all the way down to, I believe, the building right before the post office, old
Yeah.
post office.
So, I mean, what you just presented as suggested as areas where this might be used to benefit the property based on existing structures. That's in keeping with my thought, as far as preserving existing structures and allowing them some kind of use.
Right.
And so perhaps it's not the district per se, but the actual structure wherever it exists in the downtown, or the core, that could take advantage of this. One of the problems with it is buildings in the downtown district, I forget what we call it, the downtown zoning district, have a closer proximity to municipally owned parking. And we used money from this to enhance that parking lot. Some of the other areas that you talk about, there's no municipally owned land, well, there is right now, down on Depot Street, but.
There is there's technically the lot right in the depot area.
Yeah.
Right in front of the Balducci's, but that's,
Right.
you can't grow that much larger.
Right. I think that's been allocated to quite a few different businesses already.
Sure.
But in order to generate parking from these fees, it's going to be a lot more expensive than just what it costs to pave an area. I mean, at some point, you've got to buy a property and construct a whole parking lot. We know how expensive that is. I know Heidi's in favor of looking at what we charge for the payment as being more realistic and in line with what it costs to generate parking in town. Karen, you've had your hand up for a while.
Hey, I had about 12 to 15 business owners show up at the planning commission meeting last week, and they're all frustrated. I had Pete Keelan, I had the guy that owns Green Mountain Shops, I had Northshire Bookstore, I had Langway. Everyone's like upset with the parking situation in this town. All the big hitters that have property, and you guys continue to allow other businesses to go in, some that just don't have the adequate parking. And then you tell Walgreens, you tell Stanton Wiener, you tell Charlie's Coffee that you can put up signs that say parking only for Charlie's Coffee. Go ahead and tow them. And then you throw the burden on those property owners. And it's got to stop. It's you drive through Walgreens is packed. Like, they used to park in the Green Mountain Shops, and now they're parking at Walgreens. And Pete Keelan, he's not happy. And Northshire Bookstore, they have their own set of issues with cars parking for multiple days, and they've been dealing with that. And Langway doesn't want people parking in their back parking lot. So we pay a lot of taxes. You got to think about the business owners in this community.
I appreciate that, Karen, and what you're saying is true. We've, through our zoning ordinance especially, we've created a situation where property owners covet their parking. I mean, it is a necessary ingredient of them getting a permit. And we could apply that ordinance as it's written for X number of square feet of retail, for X number of seats in a restaurant, whatever the need is for parking. If we applied it fairly, there are just so many buildings in this town that could never be redeveloped because they don't have the space for parking. So do we want the Factory Point Bank buildings, all the buildings on Main Street, do we want them as they change ownership or change uses to just go vacant without a way to get around the parking regulations as they're written? Those buildings could never be redeveloped. The flip side of that is exactly what you're talking about. We have mandated that other businesses have X number of parking spaces based on what their use is. And by allowing these buildings to be developed, we're creating overuse of those spaces. And that's what the payment in lieu is supposed to be doing. Is it's supposed to be going to the town, and the town is supposed to be looking at ways to provide public parking to offset the shortage created by these buildings. In many cases, there's going to be a lag. There's a critical mass that you reach when it forces the issue of purchasing or taking ownership of a downtown property and making it parking. So it's several different needs pulling in different directions on these parking lots, but I certainly understand, because I've seen it so many times, well beyond the few businesses that you mentioned, where overuse of one property impacts the parking on another, and they're not able to conduct their business because there's no space for their patrons. So I get it. And we're always trying to find a better way, but any downtown or urban area, parking is always going to be an issue, always.
Mr. Chairman, Karen, I have a question. So all the people you mentioned, has anybody offered a solution?
the town has to provide it. You guys have to, like, I actually did offer a solution. Your green, where you're building that bridge, you could take that out and you could turn that into a parking lot.
Well,
But that's
the
still not close for my property,
Yeah,
right?
no, that wasn't, the reason I asked the question was, there's been a lot of talk about abandoning, parking requirements, and it's happened all throughout America, actually. They're just, and both large and small towns have just given up on parking minimums and requirements. And I know that in the 80s, there was a park and walk, and there are a lot of underutilized lots in town. Some spring to mind. These are times when, not holiday weeks per se, but people would park and walk and and find a place wherever they could. And I'm not sure whether that's something we should really be looking closely at and find out how it's working elsewhere. I mean, I remember we went downtown last summer, walked our dogs and wound up at your place getting ice cream, and we were parked in somebody else's lot. And it seemed to me that was just a perfect way to operate within town. And that would mean places like, Bill's place, and they couldn't put up a sign probably that said this is parking only for that business owner. If the whole town would be shared parking.
It's deeded.
Our parking is deeded. We own the rights.
Right, and I think that probably, I haven't read everything about it. I was just looking it up. And I quickly scanned an article about it, but I imagine that would be something where, and in the past, I think that's what happened. People agreed to allow it to happen. I don't remember I don't know if you remember, but the park and walk signs were all over throughout town. And I think it was just a collaborative effort, cooperative and collaborative. But it may be
Now, it
something we should.
started with the Shallots and with Act 250, our property was the big proponent of it. But you have to realize our property had 79 parking spaces at one point. You guys have reduced it down to a nominal amount. We used to have 41 parking spaces at the Hampton Inn. You discounted that down to 16, and they're 950 feet away on the southwest corner. People aren't parking at the Hampton Inn and walking over. It's just not happening. And then on top of it, we're fighting with our neighbor because of Lee Crone's failure to follow the rules, and he changed the use without looking at the parking agreements and the deeds.
I know this is an unresolved ongoing issue, and we're certainly not going to come to any resolution of that here this evening. We're under discussion of the receipt of a land use ordinance from the Planning Commission. Do we need to schedule a hearing?
No, you can approve it tonight.
We can't approve it tonight.
You adopt it tonight. It goes into effect in 60 days.
Yeah. So, I mean, what you're saying, it's not that it's not germane, because it all has to do with parking and deficit parking and how this ordinance might be applied. But it adds more momentum, I think, to what I was talking about, that there needs to be a little bit of an expectation as to how it's going to be managed.
This might be just a procedural question. What's the difference between this and the changes that we adopted as part of the 29, where we had to have a public hearing to adopt?
Procedurally, yeah.
Yeah. What's the difference? Why can we adopt this one
Without having a
public hearing?
That's a good question. I'm not sure I know the answer right now.
And that's fine. I think first of all, I wanted to say that I think that while I understand Karen's point and the difficulty in obtaining parking and, you know, it is a part of your property and all of those things, I think as a larger scale discussion that needs to occur, whether it's, you know, as Greg mentioned, you know, places that are just looking at abandoning parking minimums because of, you know, utilizing the types of business. I mean, I drive through town all the time and I see severely underutilized parking spaces. And I'm not saying it's the fault of the business, or I'm not saying it's I don't want to point fingers at anyone at this point. We have what we have. How are we going to solve what we have, right? And I look at, you know, like the Starbucks / Subway's former Friendly's parking lot. 50% of the day you can go through that parking lot and there's nothing there, right? Same with the Price Chopper Shopping Center. There are, based on sizes of you know, the minimums that we've required for certain types of business, I think at minimum need to be reevaluated. And I think, you know, obviously, it wasn't a unanimous vote in the Planning Commission. There was one dissent, and the reason specifically why it was a dissent was because that person felt that there needed to be a solution or some part of a solution in place rather than just, let's just make this change. And I think what you're saying, Ivan, is really important because, you know, now as I continuously think about the properties that are going to be affected, which, you know, quite frankly, a building across, I'm thinking of all of the older style buildings like Salty Saltzman's old building, like where Heidi's old office, Seifel Nicholas is, and those types of buildings, those would be, I believe, part of that change of use that would not be able to take advantage of something like this, which those buildings are maybe not built around the time of the automobile being created, but they are certainly historic. They have a footprint on a parcel that is restricting them from parking. And we would be potentially putting that business or that building in a position where they're not going to be able to develop. And there are actually, I don't want to say blighted buildings, but there's certainly buildings that are not living up to their full potential. That doesn't mean that, you know, Karen's concern isn't valid. It just means that I think we need to potentially look at, I would like to see this as not changing the area. I think what you said is a very valid point. At least let's look at the fact that it cannot be a tear down with a recreation at this point. And then later on, let's come back to the fact of reevaluating the requirements for parking. I do agree with you for the fact that there's nothing on the horizon right now for us to put in a parking lot. I will be firmly against changing the town green into a parking lot.
I think that green was created and people donated to it. under
Oh, yeah.
the specifics of it. It was going to be a town green.
I mean, I remember when it was Manchester Motors, so.
Yeah, me too.
Right, so.
I bought a truck and 2 cars there. So.
Yeah, so I think, I mean, I personally, on the procedural side, I don't know what the difference is between this particular change in the ordinances compared to the previous set of 24.
The 24, was that a change to the town plan?
No,
Okay.
these
so
were the
an
ones that
ordinance?
happened over
This is specific to ensuring that what happened at the new restaurant doesn't happen across the street, for example, in a property that's for sale. So this is just going back to what everybody thought was the case. The downtown core was, you know, parking, payment in lieu of parking, not as far up as where that happened. So we said, okay, let's just fix that now so that it doesn't cause even more problems in the future. And that's what this language is about. I mean, I personally, I know what you're concerned about. I think we go with this change for the purpose that we intended. And if for some reason somebody comes and tears down a block worth of buildings, and I think the DRB has to address that.
Well,
And I think we can also
and I have.
probably include it at another.
And I have stated
provision.
that it's the word may, not shall, right? So yes,
Yeah.
they have the ability to say no. We have the ability to say no.
Yeah, right.
And I
That's
get
baked
that.
in, right.
I mean, at this point, I believe that we should be keeping the space and, I mean, what seems to be more difficult in this situation of the property for Christos, the Alexio property across, we need to come up with what we're gonna call it, because I've heard it being called many things, the property next to the roundabout. Is that yes, the property was demolished and a new building was put up in its place. Whether it was the same footprint, I know it's the second floor, whatever. The point is that we wouldn't have this conversation right now about that property if it stated already that it was only meant for the reuse of an existing building.
Yeah.
So yes, the property across the street,
Yeah,
yeah, it is, I mean, if they tear it down, which I don't think they're going to, but
Build them.
Who knows?
and build something, yeah.
sure.
Or
that-
make use of
Right.
four stories then. Because the state may be, allowed for that under tier one.
So Greg, you were headed down a path. You were saying maybe we should put this in place, which restricts the area where the district. where
Which
this-
was our original
where this might
intent.
be
Yeah,
applied,
yeah.
and where it's most likely to be beneficial to the majority of the buildings. And, but then look at the bigger picture of parking, which is a huge.
Look at the bigger picture, including abandoning parking restrictions and also the number that we're going to charge for
Yeah,
per space and include language about new versus existing
but if
structures.
and I'll go back to this, if the word is may and not shall, and we're saying we're gonna just restrict the space, we're gonna make this change so it's only valid for the downtown core. But we're saying because we don't have the language in here about tear down and rebuild, we're still gonna give the DRB the ability to say no to something, right? What's the difference right now and just saying, DRB, you have the ability to say yay or nay on something if it comes up to you in the existing zone. I think the better move at this point is to say, while I appreciate the effort that's gone into this, going to the planning commission and the work that they've done, it should be at least based on the demolition and rebuild of the building rather than just restricting, because otherwise all we're doing is, yes, there may be less people that would actually show up and say, I would like to do this, but ultimately it's still going to be up to, like if someone wanted to go right now and tear down TPW real estate, right? And put up a new building with
4 stories.
4 stories, we're still going to have to potentially say no. Which is the same thing we would do right now if they showed up and did that same building. We would still have to say no based on the fact that it's not viable.
Well, that would be, if we made this change, then they would have to do payment in lieu of parking and if they needed 16 spaces or whatever it was, that would be, they would pay whatever that fee becomes, right? And we're looking for ways to offset the parking like we did behind Walgreens. So,
Yep, but I hear what Ivan is saying though, is that your original intent, yes, I understand that the shrinking of the size of the space or the potential area which it could be used. But it seems to me that your argument actually is that it was meant, or the intent of it was for buildings that were pre-automobile or don't have the structure of having available parking.
Yeah, I mean, it was clearly, the discussion was around Main Street where the buildings are shoulder to shoulder. There's no parking. They have no
Right.
parking. They have no land. And under our current ordinance, you can't change the use of any of those buildings because they can't provide the parking that our ordinance demands. And that was what precipitated the whole discussion. I don't think anybody under the context had considered taking a smaller structure that had parking and leveling it and maximizing the lot and then asking for be able to pay in lieu of parking. So to me, that was a use of the ordinance that wasn't consistent with my idea of how the ordinance is going to be used. I can't speak for anybody else. But just from my perspective, the ordinance should be used for existing buildings, not for a tear down and a rebuild.
I agree with you,
The same.
Ivan.
Thank you, Heidi. So what do we do with this?
You could send it back and put that in to the proposed language.
Yeah.
For existing.
And I'd be willing to participate in drafting that language. It's,
And then the question is, does it need to be warned so that it's, so we can vote on it versus adopting it?
I know,
I'd like to know the
I did
difference.
have this very discussion with the chairs of the boards. It never directly translated into the document, I guess, but I should have participated at the meeting.
And what was also the discussion around the order in which, how this comes, like the process flow, like should it be?
Well, there was a lot of discussion about that. Should the select board have input as to whether we want to apply the payment in lieu of, since we hold the purse strings? The more you talk about it.
Right, there's.
The DRB, that's where the application is gonna go.
Right.
And they're the one that's gonna hear it. At some point, it has to come to the select board for us to determine what the payment in lieu of parking is gonna be. But it looks like under the current procedure, the number of spaces has largely already been determined before it gets here.
Mhm.
So I think there needs to be a better understanding in the ordinance as to the intent of when it should be used. And that's just my own perspective, but I believe Heidi agrees. Karen, you had something else you wanted to say?
I'm not sure. Karen, can you hear us? Your hand's up.
In 2008, in the zoning ordinance book, your parking space at that point was $15,000.
Yes, I realize that. I think it was still $15,000 in 2013, which was 12 years ago. Was $15,000 in 2013.
Okay, so that really needs to be looked at. And then the other thing is that I don't really think you have a big issue in the downtown corridor if uses are changing from retail to offices to apartments. Like that use, they're pretty comparable. When you have an issue, it's really when something is becoming a restaurant. Because restaurant seats demand more for a shorter amount of time, like 5 to 7 o'clock, 5 to 8:30, 12 to 2, like restaurants fill up. So that's where you run into issues.
Yeah, but also in the ordinance is the ability to share parking for uses that are not competing for the same time period of parking. So, for instance, a restaurant that's open in the evening wouldn't compete with a retail store that closes at 5, that sort of thing.
Right. But unfortunately, the DRB doesn't look at that and they don't do your little graph to calculate. That's part of our issue because you have two restaurants, two 30-seat restaurants sharing a 29 parking space lot.
So here's where we sit. As of right now, we have a moratorium on payment in lieu of parking until we can get something meaningful in place. The majority of the planning commission felt that this was the change that would meet our needs. We may be in disagreement with that. But we're covered. We are still under a moratorium. So I don't think, I mean, I heard at least one board member say that there's no harm in passing this. I don't think I would be leaning toward that.
Yeah.
I think I would,
Yeah.
let's get it right. So just this one little piece of it works the way that we intend it to work. So
Ivan, was
Yes.
there, didn't we have a timeline though? We might need to make a motion to extend the timeline on that.
I think we extended it.
It was another 90
We,
days.
another 90 days.
When is
I think we're just, maybe just barely into that.
Yeah, we're not into it yet.
But yeah, it was like
We have to
March.
deal with it probably the first meeting after town meeting.
Yeah, so let's leave the moratorium in place. This is me suggesting. And maybe I will get my thoughts down in a more coherent and cohesive way and submit that to the planning commission with the board's agreement, of course. And I think there's been a little bit of a breakdown into as to what the intent was. And so I think we can get this a little better. Are we in agreement?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's just
Not
let
taking it.
Carl, did you have something you wanted to say or are you out?
I was just, I didn't know about the moratorium. I was going to suggest that you have a moratorium until this issue is debated and decided. So nobody can sneak in while
Yeah,
you're.
we're ahead of you on this one. The moratorium's already in place, so.
Good, glad to hear it.
Thank you for those thoughts. Are we good for now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. I thank everyone for their comments on that. Speaking of the DRB, Ray Ferrarin, who's in attendance here this evening, has resigned from the DRB, the Development Review Board, and we have received one applicant for this position. We have that, a letter from that applicant in our packet. Sideways. I read
You
it
can
like-
spin
I
it.
read it like this.
It's there, it's up there. That.
Oh, there it is. Yeah,
Yeah.
okay, thank you.
It's upside down.
That's okay, I can see it on my head.
Do you like it now?
Yeah, I
How's
love it. That's great, thank you. What's the board's feeling on this?
At the last meeting, I think we touched on this a little bit. I'm totally in favor of Eileen moving into, I believe, moving into Ray's spot. Is that correct?
It's
Okay,
it's a vacant spot.
Or the vacant spot, the
Only
vacant
Ray's.
spot that vacated by,
If,
right.
yeah, if appointed, she would fill the remaining term, whatever that number of years is, and then would be up for renewal. Let me just add that she now sits on the Design Review Board, and the Design Review Board meets on the same evening, for those of you that don't know, as the Development Review Board, and there's a lot of interaction between the two boards. So she has had experience with sitting at the table, the same table with the DRB, and I suspect could
It's
hit the ground running.
right. It's a good progression too.
Yeah.
So,
Which-
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to appoint Eileen Brahini to the Development Review Board.
Second.
Move to second, any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
That's 5-0, and congratulations, Eileen. We'll get a letter to her.
We will, yeah.
And while we're on the topic, I just want to publicly thank Ray for all your years of
Absolutely.
serving the town in that capacity. well, I totally appreciate it. I served with you, and you were a huge asset to Manchester. Are a huge asset, I should say.
We all agree with that. Thank you, Ray. We have a class one vending license application from NZ.
Nancy Lenhart, submitted a renewal application for class one vending, without any changes from last year. Same location, same, equipment, and same approval from the property owner. And the DRB has actually weighed in on this already, and they're fine with it.
Clearly, we should deny it. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to approve a class one vending license for Nancy's Carts and Catering.
Second.
Moved, seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
1 second.
Aye.
Sorry.
We have a
Just
discussion.
wanted to double check. Because based on our last meeting, right, we changed the fee schedule, right? So that would apply to this application.
That's correct.
So I just wanted to note that on the application
She
itself.
put the incorrect amount, yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to.
Oh,
that's all
good, yeah.
We will bill her.
Catch.
Correct.
Okay.
Good catch. We have to.
Any further discussion?
No, sorry.
All in favor, say aye.
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 That's 5-0, and Nancy's back in business. Town manager updates.
Sure, got several here. The ongoing winter expenses, I just wanted to update you on that and tell you where we stand. We've expended our budgeted amount for sand and salt, as you might imagine. Ran through that this week, end of last week. Since then, we've had a couple little storms. So just kind of an FYI in that regard. And it seems like every storm seems to be coming on the weekend, so we're generating a lot of overtime also. We have had one truck breakdown. And we also had pedestrian light taken out down by where Barnville intersects with Maine. I'm just trying to mute everybody. Okay, so anyways, it's been a difficult winter and it's costing us a lot of money, but the crew is doing a great job over there.
This last storm sucked. Can't put it any other way.
I gotta tell you, the ones that really hurt us were those day after day after day of those little 1.5
Yeah.
snowstorms.
Yeah.
Cost us the tree.
Yeah.
Wow, and it was every day.
Yeah, and we're running into some salt issues, acquiring salt, and it's just this eastern seaboard is the same situation. But we're doing all right with,
There was actually, there was a piece on the news about that.
yeah, I saw one on Troy, same issue, but, yeah, but we're doing all right. Jeff got good relations with several vendors, and so, we've been able to buy our salt when we
Supposed to
need it.
get warmer next week, hopefully.
We're hoping for that.
Yeah.
A little bit of warmth, a little bit of break, steady break would be nice. The town plan timeline that we've been working on so strictly that it's been tentatively accepted and approved by the planning commission. They're going to hold a public hearing on the proposed plan on March 13th at their meeting. And at that time, they'll listen to the public and then possibly send it our way or your way. One more thing before I get into Steve. Town clerk has sent me a reminder about the elections, and I just wanted to mention it. So absentee and early ballots are by request only. Voters may request ballots online through mvp.vermont.gov or by visiting the clerk's office during normal business hours. The absentee and early ballots are available to be submitted until 2 p.m. on Monday, the 3rd, March 3rd. And polls will be open here from 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. on Tuesday, the 4th. And she anticipates unofficial election results that night by 10 p.m. So that was just that reminder. And then finally, I know traditionally select boards have assigned certain articles to various members, and I just thought I'd bring that up in case you want to talk about that now.
Yeah, I think we should. Under Article 1, I suppose, under the present awards and make acknowledgements, we were talking about presenting 4 years worth
4 years worth, yeah,
of
yeah.
town meeting, or, excuse me, town report cover. And we got to have some kind of structure to that. Who's going to do it? Right?
Well, yeah, I'd be perfectly happy to read those descriptions of each of the recipients. But it might also be nice to have each one of us, take one and read it, because people get bored of my voice real fast.
I'm bored already. No.
I've been bored.
So, Greg, do you anticipate like reading the whole application?
I'm wondering whether we
Seems like,
paraphrase those, because that's
what I was thinking.
That would be, yeah.
I mean, if you want to expand a little bit on the current years, it might make more
Right.
sense.
yeah, the other ones are, we're just catching up with something that didn't happen.
I think we might be able to.
We missed
cut
it
those
during
down.
COVID and never got back into the
Right.
swing of things. So, yeah, I don't think we need to read
The entire
the entire thing.
description, right?
I'll have Katie work something up for you.
Yeah, that'd be fine.
Okay.
That'd be a good
And
idea.
them see that.
This year and last, I think,
All right.
maybe in its entirety.
Okay. I'll have her put something together for you.
Just do the who, what, where, why, and when on those, wait.
Sure.
Okay, great.
Was there anything else that we were going to address under Article 1? To your knowledge, any?
No.
Out of the ordinance? We usually, that's the point at which we would identify errors or omissions in the town report. I don't think we have any errors in there. I didn't.
We do have a language
Okay.
identifying. That's the thing that Heidi had brought up that Mike Norath had mentioned to her. And I spoke to Mike last week about it actually, and I sent you guys an email on it.
Right.
So we could bring that up at that time.
Okay.
So we don't, have to address it when
So-
questions come up.
Does somebody want to address that particular issue?
I can talk to that.
Okay.
Assuming I'm allowed to talk, being a non-resident.
Well, that gets approved at the beginning of the meeting.
There you go.
If that doesn't pass, then.
Doesn't pass and someone else.
All that is a blanket agreement by the body that's there to allow out-of-town people to speak to an issue for which they, mostly on the voted appropriations, but I would think as the town manager that you'd be allowed to speak, but we'll clear that.
I'm sure it'll be helpful.
Beforehand.
And with the, because I mentioned to you, Scott, on page 45, under financial reports, that the reserve fund balances are reflective of June 30th, 2023.
That's correct.
Yet the letter states that it's at the year ending June 30th, 2024. Because I think your statement was that was the last audited balance.
That's correct. I don't want to give them unaudited balances. Now, I will have them at the meeting, so when you guys want to discuss items and talk about it with some knowledge, but I don't want to post unaudited balances in there because they could be corrected and then be changed.
Yeah, I found it confusing.
It is.
Yeah.
It is, but it's the really only reliable source that we can go to and turn to and say, these are audited numbers.
So in the narrative, are you saying the narrative's inconsistent with the chart itself?
Yeah, I actually, when I read it the first two times, I know the second sentence literally says, upon completion of our audit, the financial statements and our report thereon will be available for public inspection by the town office. This chart, to me, looks like it's actually superimposed on the picture. So it actually looks like it could be, in fact, what was available. So that's the part that I found confusing. I would just, if it is what you said it is, I think it's just clear that we should say, you know, on page 45, where we state the balances, these are the balances as of 6/23. That's not a typo.
Okay.
And that these are the audited, fully audited values, and you know, next year's report will reflect up to 2024, et cetera.
That's, that is a clarification of the report itself, and therefore should be addressed under Article 1.
Okay.
If you think we should do that.
I
If
do.
you want to do that, then we'll make sure that Mike or that the moderator knows, and
And then Jonathan can handle it.
yeah, and Jonathan can speak to
I
that.
brought it up. I can handle it, right? Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
Article 2 is the budget. Historically, I've done that. If somebody else wants to, that's fine. I'm more than happy to do it again.
Be happy to have you do it.
Okay, I volunteer. Article 3 is typically done by the
Yeah, the
treasurer.
Oh, that's right, yeah. Brian? If Brian's not there to do it, I can take it.
I suspect he's going to be there, but I don't know for sure.
Right.
Article 4 is the creation of a reserve fund. And then Article 5 is funding that. If, I suppose if Article 4 fails,
There's no need for
and Article 5 passes, what do we do?
It doesn't happen.
I'm happy to take those, Ivan.
Both of those?
Yeah.
Okay.
Heidi, 4 and 5.
Then we got the voted appropriations, which are for the entities that are asking for funds to take care of that.
I'll read them.
Well, that's, I mean, the moderator will.
Okay.
And we usually take
It's typically quite often there's a
Motion to do all.
combine all those and take them as one vote. But the moderator will deal with those. Those are outside of our control. And then the rest of it's voted by Australian ballot. Not a lot of big things in here. Is everybody happy with that? You wanna make any parting shots on the
I
way
was
out?
just about to say, maybe Dan should.
This is our last regular meeting.
Yes, it is. And, I think at the point of adjournment, we'll recognize that. We're down to other business.
I have some other business.
Okay, Heidi?
I just wanted to wish you a happy birthday, Ivan.
Okay, thank you.
That's all.
There was a suggestion that we sing happy birthday instead of doing the flag salute, but
Yeah.
I squelched that.
We could do it now, under other business.
No.
Join in with me, everybody online. Is this a good time to sing Jan's praises? Well,
Certainly.
I think it is under other business. I just want to thank Jan again for all of her time and effort on behalf of Manchester and being here on the board with us. And it's been a real pleasure serving with you.
Thank you.
It has. Many of you may not know because Jan quite often holds her thoughts to herself until it's time to let us know what she's thinking. And if you don't attend every meeting, you may not realize just how forceful she is with the way she feels about things. And I really appreciate it when the time comes for Jan to participate because she always seems to nail it right to the perfectly. So I appreciate your thoughtfulness and the consideration that you give to every issue that's in front of us and your ability to sometimes even put any one of us in line. If you think we're out of line and you're usually right. It's been my pleasure working with you for these last several years and I'm going to miss you on this board.
Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah, we are. I'm gonna miss your motions to adjourn. too.
Yeah, we don't know who's going to,
I mean, we don't know how to get out of. a
we don't know
meeting.
how to end meetings anymore. Any other business? Is there a need for an executive session?
No, sir.
None.
Move to adjourn.
There it is for the last time. Motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Heidi. All in favor, say aye.
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 We are adjourned. Our next meeting is town meeting.
Town
March
meeting.
1st, 1:00 PM at MEMS.
Thanks, Heidi.
Bye, guys. Thank you.
Enjoy the beach.